This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, our jobs of the month. And this month is, of course, June. And I'm going to hand straight to Josie, our head gardener, Josie Lewis, who's going to talk about what she's been doing this morning, which is sowing biennials.
Yeah, as soon as I notice things going to seed around the garden, like foxgloves, then I know it's time to get ready for next year and start sowing the biennials.
Yeah.
So things like digitalis we sow now, hesperis, the dianthus, all things like that can be sown now.
Yeah.
So they form big roots in their first year, and then they'll be flowering from May onwards. Next year.
And wallflowers, of course, too.
Wallflowers, yeah. Just have to think a bit ahead with biennials, but they're so worth it because they fill that gap, don't they? That May when there's often not that much in the garden.
They really do. This garden here in May is wallflowers and honesty, moving to foxgloves and sweet rocket. So without biennials, we would be stuffed.
Yeah.
And then rhubarb. People tend to think of rhubarb as a spring edible crop, but actually you can go on picking rhubarb until early August if you want to. We certainly pick lots of it in June. We make lots of rhubarb cordial, which is with a star anise, sometimes some strawberries if you can get them cheap enough, which gives a really lovely added flavour. And you make it just like making elderflower cordial, but the recipe will be on the website and in the podcast notes. And so keep pulling it. And if it runs to flower, which it sometimes does in June and July, cut the flower down. Because actually that is the plant saying it's not particularly happy. It wants to reproduce by making flowers and seed. But cut that down immediately because it takes a lot of strength away from the root and will affect your harvest the following year.
We're busy, meanwhile, watering pots if it's June and it's warm, finally warm. So keep on top of your pots, but do check. Don't water automatically. Check that they need watering. So we tend to, with bigger pots, you stick your finger in and see how wet the compost is the most obvious way to do it. And if these big pots are drying out, then we have a regime where we definitely water on a Monday and a Friday, and they might need additional water on a Wednesday. With smaller pots, it's sometimes easier to lift them. You'll know from the weight of the pot. You'll get to know your pots. And you'll know when they're dry because they'll be very lightweight. And then it's time to water them. They may need watering every day, the smaller pots. And if the compost really shrunk in the pots, then if they're small enough, fill a barrow with water and let the whole thing soak so the compost can rehydrate.
Yeah.
The trouble is once the compost gets really dry, it's sometimes difficult to rehydrate. But if you leave them submerged, while all the bubbles escape, then you know that it's getting very wet again. And hopefully they'll be fine. But it's better to keep them slightly on the damp side during June. They won't suffer from that.
And often June is really hot. Gosh, last year, do you remember it was absolutely baking?
Yes, yeah. We did have to water
hardly
quite a lot.
Rain. Yeah. I also think of June as the month of hardy annuals. Of course, sweet peas. It's the peak moment for sweet peas. So pick, of course. Don't let any seed pods form. We've actually got this new way of picking sweet peas. Certainly towards the end of the month, we moved to, rather than picking individual flowers, we actually moved to picking the top fifth of the vine off, which might have 5 or 6 flowers from that point. So you're picking like a whole sort of trailing vine that goes into a bigger vase. So effectively you're live heading and dead heading at the same time. And you can pick any of the ones off, just cut them off that are going over, and even as they go over in the vase. So I find that a really effective way of cutting down the maintenance of sweet peas by the middle of June. And the other thing is, I absolutely love calendulas, the English marigolds, but they do tend to get mildew in a very hot June. And we have found a very effective organic treatment is 1 teaspoon of bicarb to 500 mils of water. literally a scant teaspoon of vegetable oil and a few drops of pure liquid soap. So it's a 1% solution, and the recipe will be in the podcast notes and is on the website. But we have found giving that a sort of weekly treatment, and again, we try and remember a certain day that we do that. And so things like calendulas or anything that might get mildew later in the year, like a courgette, we might even do that fortnightly from now onwards too. It's a really useful organic treatment.
And best to start before you see the mildew. It's just getting in there when you think it might arrive. Use
it prophylactically rather than when the problem has arisen. Great. So I hope there's some useful things there for your gardening in June.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, I'd really love it if you reviewed, rated and subscribed on wherever you listen to your podcasts. It'll help new listeners to know that we're here and enable us to keep getting the very best and most interesting guests week after week.